I'm Roberta Senechal de la Roche. I'm a retired historian and sociologist from Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. And my first major publication was what I first titled The Sociogenesis of a Race Riot. And then when the second edition came out, the editor very gently said, you need a sexier title than that. So the second volume is called In Lincoln's Shadow, the Springfield Race Riot of 1908. Now, the question of how I came to this as a graduate student, and I was a graduate student at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. As I say in my book and as I say in my talks, I was inspired by a study that was published way back in the 1970s that was regarded as the definitive study of the Salem witchcraft event. And the two scholars, the book was titled Salem Possessed. The two scholars who did the study got right down at the grassroots level. They looked at who was accused of witchcraft and all of the details of their life and their social networks. And then they did the same for the accusers. So we have social profiles of everybody involved in the Salem witchcraft trials. And they uncovered aspects of conflict in that community that otherwise would have been impossible. And I was much taken with that book. And so when I went into graduate school, I was already interested in collective violence. So I said, I would like an eminently researchable topic in the area of collective violence, and to my own preference in the area of collective violence. And so I went collective violence shopping, and I said, how about a race riot? And so I went through the whole literature, and I realized that there was a hugely well-publicized race riot in a very important place that had not been touched except for a couple of very amateurish articles. And the place was Springfield, Illinois in 1908, a place that witnessed a 2-day race riot that ended up with most of the Black residents, 2,500 to 3,000 of them, being driven out of the community. It ended up with a whole Black business district in downtown Springfield being destroyed, and a lot of Black residences were destroyed as well. 2 African Americans were killed in the process very brutally. And I was real cold-blooded about this. I said, this is the capital of Illinois. This is Abraham Lincoln's hometown. He's buried here. There has got to be a wealth of materials on this. And so I chose it. I went out there and researched. It took me 8 years to do an analysis of who rioted, and also an analysis of who was targeted, and who was targeted first and who was targeted later, who was victimized, because not everybody was. And I said, what can I discover about this riot with this kind of information? What kinds of surprises might there be? I also started reading sociological theory on collective violence as much as I could. And I came to realize that explanations of collective violence were almost entirely, whether it's interracial violence in the form of anti-Black riots or whether it was anti-Black lynchings in the South, they all used what's called a social strain theory. And a social strain theory is a theory that says there are things in the community or things in the country like unemployment or crime or factors at that level, or wartime tensions, what have you, that somehow predispose people to riot or to lynch. There are frustrations out there. In the South, it was fluctuating price of cotton. If prices of cotton went down, there were more lynchings. And so the same kind of logic was applied to anti-Black violence in the North. So that's how it got started. I saw that this was going to be a really, really good topic. There are lots of race riots. There's still a lot of race riots that haven't been studied. There was one in Evansville, Illinois. There was one in Springfield, Ohio. There was one in Springfield, Missouri. There are a whole bunch of turn of the 20th century anti-Black riots that have not been studied. And one of my sort of amusements, my breaks away from the Springfield Race Riot was to look at newspapers about these other riots that occurred at about the same time. And I began to see similarities with Springfield. So that's kind of a long story. I found myself a good topic on my own. The funniest thing about it was my dissertation advisor, who was French. And he said, you can't do this topic. You can't do this topic. This topic is stupid. He said, I have a better topic for you. He's like wanted me to work in his field. I said, what's that? I want you to study middle-class social welfare workers at the turn of in the late Victorian period. And I said, that's really not up my alley. That's not where my heart is, It's a nice topic for a woman's historian, but I'm a violence historian. And we had knockdown, drag-out fights. He didn't want me to do it. And it probably irritated him that my book, The Sociogenesis of a Race Riot, won 2 distinguished prizes. That was probably the last straw for him. We really didn't communicate very much after that. So anyway, that's the story of the evolution.